Welcome back. This is our 12th show in a series of shows entitled Rehabilitation Coming Soon, where we have been discussing the mass incarceration practices of the United States, and in particular, the effect of those practices on the state of Hawaii. I am Aaron Wills, a William S. Richardson Law School graduate and a consultant for retired Judge Mike Town's private mediation practice. Over the past 12 weeks, we have heard from people in the community who are willing to discuss the criminal justice system and see the problem of mass incarceration from different perspectives throughout the legal community. Today, we'd like to hear the perspective from a lawyer, a writer, an artist, and a teacher, a jack of all trades. Our guest today is Sonny Ganaden. Sonny was the lead writer of the Native Hawaiian Justice Task Force report delivered to the legislature in 2013. He is an instructor in ethnic studies and American studies departments at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. In 2015, he was an artist at the museum at the Honolulu Museum of Art. And last week, he was named the best single writer by the Hawaii chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists for his work in Flux Hawaii magazine. Welcome, Sonny.
Hey, morning.
All right. Well, let's first off get to know you a little bit and let our viewers know who we're talking here. So let's talk a little bit about what you do as a lawyer, and we'll go down each one of these little things that you are: lawyer, writer, artist, and a teacher.
Well, I live in Honolulu, which is one of the most expensive cities in America, if you consider Hawaii America. So it's not as if like I have 3 jobs just because I'm like trying to impress anybody. It's
right.
Like just like everybody else, I'm just trying to get by. So about 2008, during the meltdown, I was just looking for a job, and I started writing with my friends. I was educated at the Richardson School of Law, like yourself, graduated in 2006. Couldn't find a gig as a lawyer, and started writing about community, like my heroes, like the folks that educated me in law school and at UCLA.
And do you write for anybody in particular?
Yeah, so I've written for the paper. Well, there's a one-paper town, so Star Advertiser,
right.
Hanaho, the Hawaiian Airlines magazine, and I'm an editor at a magazine called Flux Hawaii, where we emphasize telling community stories.
Now, I'm ignorant to this, so I'd like to know, I mean, how does this work? Do you write an article, and then you give it to editors, and they say, oh, yeah, we'll publish it? Or how does your story get out, or your piece that you're working on get out there?
What you just discussed is a pitch. So you would probably present something and then send it to prospective editors, and then they would see if it's appropriate for their forthcoming publication. Oftentimes, if you're kind of a staffer like me, you're just looking for stories. So I'm actively talking to people about what's happening in the community. I was educated by Marxists and feminists, so so basically, I've always got in my head that somebody's being screwed over here,
Yep.
And what is that dialectic? What is that relationship? And if I can articulate that, present it, and have a good time with it, then I've probably got a good story.
And what are some of the bigger issues or pieces you've worked on in the past?
What I've been trying to do for the last few years is talk about the work of arts communities and people who do sports and relating that to social justice work. So you hear often about the metaphors of the canoe. We're in the Pacific. We're all in one canoe together. We got to paddle together, listen to your number 6. How does that apply to our conceptions of social justice? How does that apply to what it means to be on an island stuck together and trying to get to one destination together? So I've tried to unpack those in the work about sports, so about everything from baseball. I'm writing about Kahuku football right now.
And maybe they should go
past
just the one play that they run every single day.
Yeah. You're a footballer.
Run up the middle. Hey, guys, it's going to be a run up the middle. Can't stop it. Just keep on doing it.
Yeah. So the other thing is, like all this talk about sports and art and all that stuff, it redefines masculinity. So we live under a version of a toxic masculinity, and part of what we're going to talk about is this prison industrial complex and this culture of fear that has perpetuated inappropriate laws, and a lot of that is has to do with how men talk to each other, and how men talk about what it means to be a man, and how you're an XYZ, like you could name the things if you are a pacifist or if you're advocating for something other than a version of violence, right? So I've been intentionally looking to the metaphors of sport. So instead of you saying, like go out there guns drawn. You know, like you can use the metaphors of go out there and give your best, go out there and do and do your job on the play. You know, like
Right.
so think of all the things that we do like as sportsmen instead of as advocates of violence.
Right.
So as a writer and now as a teacher, we're constantly looking for the language that articulates our perspective using the ideology that we want to present.
Okay, well, let's go down the list here. So as an artist, what do you do as an artist? I mean, do you like actually paint and do actual art, or?
I'm a printmaker. So Honolulu, we're just going to talk about it. Honolulu has an excellent history of printmaking. Printmaking historically is a way to get your ideas out when you don't have an ordinary platform. So, and this goes all the way back to the history and the formation of the Republic of the United States. So the Federalist Papers, artwork about like maintaining independence, all that stuff was done on printing presses. So you just use those things and create new art. Here in Hawaii, there was the Protect Koho'olawe Ohana, Save Our Surf, the ethnic studies departments, they all used printing presses back in the 60s and 70s to get their information out. Because you couldn't find some sort of decolonial, anti-capitalist rhetoric in the newspaper, so the only way you're gonna get it is if a kid hands you a piece of paper, you know, like, hey, check out this party, do that kind of a thing. So I'm interested in printmaking not just as an aesthetic thing, but as a historical thing, so how it connects us as social justice advocates and as fighters to that history of social justice advocacy.
Okay, and I know that you're also a teacher. What classes do you teach? And you teach up at UH?
Yeah, they gave me a gig. So I'm teaching in the American Studies department. They let me make my own class. It's called Art and Social Change.
Oh, cool.
So it just has something to do with the discussion we just had about validating the works of artists and activists and making legitimate social change. If you look at the history of the United States and Hawaii, the world even, any expansion of liberties for underserved communities is always predated by the work of artists and of people out in the community writing about these things, doing what we're doing here, which is having a conversation. That conversation leads to consensus, and then we can present that to people in power. There are like many Marxist quotes that say that power concedes nothing without struggle. Part of that struggle is just having a conversation, right? Like we are struggling through this right now. We are struggling through getting through this conversation and presenting this to the public. And then we bring that to the legislature, and then that's how we make change.
Okay, well, let's talk about that, what we're trying to make a change in. So, over our past show, discussions have centered around mass incarceration practices of the United States, in particular, the effect of those practices on the state of Hawaii. So, as you're familiar with, obviously, and I sent you my paper that I wrote on this, there is a over-incarceration of Native Hawaiians in the state of Hawaii. So, Sonny, why should we care specifically about having too many Hawaiians in prison?
Well, should we care as non-Hawaiians? Like, so, I mean, the historical rhetoric is that we shouldn't care, that this is a part of America and that we have equality in the court systems, and if you are found guilty of a crime, you do the time.
Right.
When you look at the numbers, it just doesn't bear out like that. We have significant amounts of social inequality, what we would colloquially call racism. That means the overrepresentation of indigenous peoples in the criminal justice system at every level. In Hawaii, it actually mirrors what's happening in other first world countries. You look at Aotearoa, New Zealand, you look at the mainland United States, you look at parts of Canada, Mexico, throughout Central America. Everywhere where there's indigenous people, they are overrepresented in criminal justice. What are the kinds of connections that we can make? It has something to do with colonialism. It has something to do with culture. I had the opportunity to work on what was called the Native Hawaiian Justice Task Force report. I know you had
Judge Broderick.
Yeah, the former
chief or the chair. Or whatever.
Yeah, the former Honorable Judge Broderick, who was an excellent family court judge, and now he's at the YMCA. spreading his talents there. He was the chair of that. I was asked to be the writer of the report.
Oh,
what
wow.
we ended up doing was, and it wasn't just me, it was the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, it was 9 representatives from around the state representing the criminal justice system. But like I put it in like Chris Farley air quotes because it's the criminal justice system like is across all it's a spectrum of things.
Right.
We went to the major islands. We heard testimony from, I believe, 158 individuals. That includes folks from the judiciary, the ex-incarcerated service providers, people who actually do the work of getting folks jobs and making sure the kids don't go into jail. And we produced 48 findings and 38 recommendations.
And I know personally what one of those findings are, just to give our audience kind of a perspective of what we're talking about here. So Native Hawaiians represent, as a total population in the actual state of Hawaii, about 14% of the actual population. Yet the incarceration rate of Native Hawaiians is in the range of 43% to 45%. So what we're talking about is, if that rate keeps up, we're just incarcerating Hawaiians at an enormous rate. And the reason why we're pointing it out, because all the other ethnic groups, no other disparity is as great as the Native Hawaiians being incarcerated at that rate. Is that correct about one of the findings that you guys?
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the percentages, but the percentages don't discuss what was discussed to the task force that I was a part of, which is this is part of a history of takings of land and body by colonial powers against indigenous peoples. We are protected and educated by the United States and Hawaii State Constitution. That does not account for this traumatic history. We are articulating this in different ways. One of the things that we're discussing is, and that we discussed in the report, is something called implicit bias.
Yep.
How we all have versions of bias, right? Like we're all conceptualizing each other and the world around us because our brains make shortcuts. Those shortcuts can misfire. So when you are in a position of power, if you have a gun, if you are a judge, unfortunately, or a prosecutor, then you can put human beings in the boxes that they don't deserve to be in.
Yep, and both of us were at the implicit training that was at the Access to Justice Conference this last week on Friday, and we saw a panel of people talking about this. And one thing that kind of struck me is that it affects everybody. There's nobody that's safe from this, and it makes me think that it almost has to be a mandatory type training that every single professor, every single law enforcement officer, every judge should have to take. And the problem with this is it may expose some people more than they want to be exposed.
Well, nobody wants to be called a racist, right?
Right.
And then, but like, we're not talking about individualized racism. We're talking about is a history of disempowerment and disenfranchisement, and how can we remedy that? And how can we, how can we save the state a lot of money and make us a lot safer? To get to the point of mass incarceration, part of what the conversation in Hawaii has been missing is that this costs us so much money. We don't even know the number. The state of Hawaii puts it at $45 to $55 million a year with the current contract with the CCA. With the CCA. Yep. The CCA is the Corrections Corporation of America. Because they get to choose who they house, and they usually get the guys who have a long time to serve, who are healthy, who are Hawaiian because they're chill, right? They make a lot of money off of this.
Yep. All right, well, we're going to talk more about that CCA connection when we come back. And this is Sonny Ganaden, and my name is Aaron Wills, and this is Rehabilitation Coming Soon. Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on Think Tech Hawaii every Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Start your Pauhana weekend off with the show where I talk to people about issues pertinent to Hawaii. You can see my previous shows at my blog, kauilucas.com, and also on ThinkTech's.
Aloha. My name is John Waihe'e, and I actually had a small part to do with what's happening today. Served actually in public office. But if you don't already know that, here's a chance to learn more about what's happening in our state by joining me for Talk Story with John Waihe'e every other Monday. Thank you, and I look forward to your seeing us in the future.
Okay. Thank you, and welcome back. I'm Aaron Wills. This is Rehabilitation Coming Soon, and we are sitting here with our SES, Sonny Ganaden. Okay, so Sonny, we were talking about CCA, and as you know, CCA is the largest incarcerator of people in the world. How do we come up with that? Well, the U.S. incarcerates more people than any other country in the world, and CCA is the largest incarcerator of criminals in the United States. Therefore, it makes them the largest incarcerator in the world. What are your thoughts on the state of Hawaii and the relationship with this contract with CCA that they have, and specifically for Saguaro, which houses all of our male inmates now, and at the tune of about 1,500 to 1,600 inmates?
Well, I need to preface this with my own conception that I find this like morally abhorrent that we are shipping human beings something like 6,000 miles away to the
2,000.
center of the desert, housing them there, and then not allowing them to perform their religious rites, not allowing them to see their families. So I have a knee-jerk reaction to what the state of Hawaii has been doing since 1994. The part of what the governor and the Department of Public Safety said at that time, because I've read the documents and done the research, is that we needed to because of the state that our state facilities were in. OCCC, in Kalihi overcrowded, Halava overcrowded. They haven't done much to fix those facilities. They've gotten worse. The members of the legislature took a tour of the place a couple years ago, and they described it as third world.
Yep. Like 10 people to a cell, people sleeping on the floors. It is third world.
Yeah, and so the CCA has had a good selling point for the last few decades, which is, state of Hawaii, you are so backwards, we're just going to do it better and do it cheaper. This is the same kind of thing that happens in the privatization of a lot of other industries. Unfortunately, we are talking about the flesh trade, moving and selling human bodies.
Well, there's one important thing that a lot of people kind of skip over this point, but, in the state of Hawaii, we don't have the death penalty. I personally don't believe in it. I don't believe it should be taking other people's life. But the problem is the state of Arizona does have a death penalty. So what we do when we ship prisoners to Arizona, if they commit a crime such as murder of another inmate inside the prison, we've just subjected them and exposed them to the death penalty and the laws of Arizona. There's an actual case that's going on right now that's dealing with this from an inmate who was killed over there. A Hawaiian inmate who was transferred, killed another inmate, and now he's going through litigation, trying to stay out of the death penalty, but he's subject to it because of their laws.
Well, it's the wretched situation leading to wretched consequences.
Right.
So this is one of many horrific stories that has come out of the relationship that Hawaii entered into with private contractors to house human beings.
Yep.
We have an opportunity right now to change that conversation. So it seems like the legislature is interested in replacing OCCC. If you read the news, you see how screwed up they are with the rail deal. They're $2 billion, $3 billion? Who knows? It changes every week, right?
Well, we were told it wasn't going to be any more than
$1.5
billion.
the idea is they're gonna take out OCCC and then where these guys gonna go? Maybe put a rail station there, and do some version of an economy of scale. I take that from the words of Nolan Espinda, who's at the Department of Public Safety, and then rebuild Halava, do some sort of giant, like Tower of Terror or something out there. What the research that I did was, and what I've been talking about for the last few years is, this is not that deep. There are members of the community, service providers that have been helping people. Those who are formerly incarcerated, those who are the victims of domestic violence. I used to be a staff attorney at the Domestic Violence Action Center, talking to DV victims, helping people get restraining orders. There are people actually doing this work out in the community. They've been doing it for decades. If we were to just change the budget, we don't have to agree on everything. And I'm talking about me and the legislators, or me and the prosecutors, or whatever. But just to realize that there are community members, there are legitimate nonprofits and advocacy groups that can actually help people. Instead of locking people up and throwing away the key, we will be saving the state lots of money. All this conversation about what are we going to do about the state pension plan, what are we going to do about state retirements. From the perspective of advocates like me, I know exactly where your money's going. It's going to friggin' Arizona.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, just to put this all in perspective, so I don't know if you're familiar. Well, our first show we talked about with Bob Merce. And they went on this tour of Norway with a bunch of other political dignitaries from over here. And they basically toured what they are terming the most successful prison system in the world. And the reason that they say that is because the recidivism rate is somewhere around 20%, which is really unheard of here in the United States. So one of the things that they've come up with, and this is what we're talking about, is what are they going to do with OCCC? Because the estimates right now are somewhere in the ballpark of $500 million, okay, just to build a new prison. And all they're talking about doing is taking OCCC and stacking it on top of Halava and building some monstrosity of a warehouse to warehouse more criminals.
The most powerful people in the most powerful advocacy groups in Hawaii have historically been developers. That's how it's been since statehood. So they are going to jack up this price to raise OCCC and rebuild a new facility.
Yeah.
I don't care if we go for a mainland contractor or a local contractor. This is going to be a wildly inflated contract that's going to cost the state millions of dollars. The legislature passed a bill saying that it can contract with an out-of-state private contractor to the tune of $480 million in 2014. $480 million. Do you know what these social justice advocacy groups could do with $480 million?
Wow.
So part of what we need to do is have a planned approach, and we've articulated this in the Native Hawaiian Justice Task Force report. Folks have done it in other states where you stop so many people going into mass incarceration, so you beef up the kinds of programs that we know work, things like drug court, like the Housing First model that works with the homeless community, those kinds of things. There's a number of them, right?
Right.
And then we end our contracts with private prisons on the back end.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that we have to do something about bringing the prisoners back. I mean, I think you're right. I think that the number is somewhere around 30 to 40 million a year to CCA, and the governor secretly this year just signed a 3-year extension for them, and with an option at the end for 2 more years. So we're not going to stop doing this anytime soon. And so that means money is going to be going out the door. So what we really need to do here is we need to build up what they call political momentum here in order to get inertia to move people to think about this in a different way.
Yeah, talk about
what
political momentum.
Yeah.
So nationwide, this is a case of odd bedfellows. So the folks that are advocating the hardest for the ending of contracts with private prisons are fiscally conservative Republicans. Texas is ending its contracts with the CCA.
Really?
Kentucky, New
Wow.
York.
And you would think they would.
Minnesota, they
Right.
ended, I think they call that place the Terror Dome, and they ended that contract. The reason is because fiscally conservative Republicans are looking at the numbers saying, why the hell are we spending all these millions of dollars basically housing black and brown people?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not making us any safer.
No, it's not.
Part of what I think we need to do and where this conversation needs to go is we need to articulate who we're fighting and what we're fighting. You and I are lawyers. We both worked really hard to finally pass the bar, and we are
That's true.
and we are trained to the extent of our ability as advocates in the adversarial system, in common law. Part of what you do in the adversarial system is you figure out who you're fighting. What are we fighting? We're fighting, well, socioeconomic inequality. We're fighting racism. We're fighting government waste. And we're fighting the lies that have been spread by folks like the Honolulu prosecutors and the Honolulu Police Department. And I'm sure you've had other guests that won't articulate it as such, but my experience after working quite hard on a report and then advocating for that at the legislature was absolute surprise in actually going to the legislature and hearing what was coming out of the prosecutors and HPD's mouths.
Yes, especially because if you think about it, all of the suggestions and that your report came up with, almost none of them have been implemented.
Well, because there's the perpetuation of this culture of fear that we need to lock people up and throw away the key. Now, there are human beings that are sociopaths, that are a danger to you and I, hard Gs. Every country has them, every community has them. Those people need to be put away, and we need to be protected from them. They are a minuscule number of those kinds of human beings walking around. The people who populate our jails are folks who have addiction problems, folks who have mental health issues, folks who have had issues with trauma in their past, and who can be rehabilitated. And it's been proven time and time again in first world countries that this is possible. When they went to Norway, they have all these wild stories about the guys singing Kumbaya and cooking with each other with giant like cutting knives and stuff. Some of those guys are face tatted up, the kinds of dudes you would walk across the street to avoid. We have those in our prisons too, and they are rehabilitatable.
No, and one thing I wanted to say was, there was an article in the paper this weekend that we both read and we were talking about or I think it was Sunday, and it was in the Star, the Star Advertiser, and it was basically about CCA and that magically over the years that we've had, contract with them, there have been no violations of any contract provisions at all. Yet we've had a person beheaded, we've had multiple prisoners and inmates killed over there. So it's one thing to say that they're complying with the contract. It's another thing for there to be all these lawsuits about what's going on over there, the treatment that they're having, people, actually dying, which wouldn't be in compliance with any contract that we have with anybody. You're not allowed to allow our inmates to die. And so it would be strictly on them about their safety procedures and the things that they have going on over there. And so I just think that the first thing we need to do, we need to get accountability, in my opinion.
Accountability, the other thing we need to do is get pissed and rip up the contract.
Yep, I agree.
Because it seems like our politicians aren't going to do it for us.
Right.
So this is what I'm talking to students about, this is what I'm talking to other advocates about, and talking to you about, because now we're moving from a conversation to consensus. So what I just said sounds leftist and Marxist and crazy. It turns out that a lot of folks in the judiciary, in academia, and in the community agree with me.
Well, thanks, Sonny, for coming down to our show and taking time out of your busy schedule. Join us next week for another show of Rehabilitation coming soon as we continue our discussion of the criminal justice system and the effect of mass incarceration on the state of Hawaii. I'm Aaron Wills, and coming up next is Sustainable Hawaii with Kirsten Turner.